Hi everyone, I'm Jackie from Wacky Jackie's. Just going back to our beginners quilt, and basically what I want to do is concentrate on beginners, because really there's not a great deal of people out there actually showing beginners different kind of techniques, and techniques that are important when you are doing beginners quilts, or you're a beginner I should say. So really what I want to do, if you want to have a look at my first beginners quilt, go back on YouTube and look at the beginners quilt. This one's called our layer cake quiz beginners quilt. So basically what we're doing is we're using a layer cake for your ease, which is a pre-cut. It's a 10-inch square, and basically we'll be using that with a little bit of meterage at the end to put on the border. So we're focusing on the beginners because we really need some younger generations coming through doing beginners quilts, and getting into our quilting industry, because yeah, we're all getting a little bit old. So we're going to do a layer cake quiz quilt, and the basic tools you need is your what they call a rotary cutter, and you need several different rulers, which is a 6.5 by 12 inches. This is a little square, which is a 6.5 by 6.5, and this is a 4.5 by 4.5. We also use this little precision tool by Pauline Rogers. She has some amazing tools, so get online and have a look at her stuff. A board, we need a board. This is only a 23 by 17 inch one. You can get much bigger than this, but this is all I'm going to use today. Of course your pattern, your layer cake, and there's a little bit of meterage, which we'll bring out later. So we're just going to do block by block to make it easier for you. And the first block will be, this is our little pattern, and all of the requirements are on the back of it, and it tells you what you need: a half square triangle, ruler, some wadding and some backing. So I'll put that over here, and we'll move on to our first block. So our first block is, as per our pattern, the layer cake quiz pattern, you take your layer cake and you break it into colours, which is light red, grey, red, and then black. So we're doing that for a reason. It doesn't have to be exact science. Basically, you just split it into 4 different colours, so that when I say here, pick 2 reds and 2 greys, it means pick 2 red layer cakes and 2 grey layer cake pieces. So what we're going to do for the first one is we're going to cut, this is small block SB1, small block 1, which is a small 4-patch block, 4.5 inch square, finished. So what we want to do is we want to pick a grey, which we'll pick this one. I'm just going according to the photos in the actual pattern because it's a little bit easier. One of those, and we want a nice rich red. So we'll go that one. So what we want to do is we want to cut each of these 10-inch squares into 4 by 2.5 inch strips. So basically we'll take the 2 10-inch squares, and we'll get our little ruler, and we'll cut them into 4 by 2, because they're 10 inches, 4 by 2.5 inch squares will work. Just make sure they're all even and all the sides are matching up, so that you don't make a mistake when you're cutting them. Now, going back to our back to basics, if you want to have a look at our back to basics on our YouTube channel, there is quite an extensive back to basics information for beginners and learners, or to reiterate, you know, like we learn bad habits as we go along, and it's nice just to go back and have a look at, you know, just little things like accurate cutting, accurate ironing and all that sort of stuff. So if you go back to the Back to Basics video, you can have a look at that and then get some tips from that if you're a pure beginner. So we want to do 4 by 2.5 inch. So that's 1. 2. And you're putting your 2.5 inch line along the side of the cut and lining the one of the lines on the bottom up with it, so you get a nice square cut and you're not making a crooked cut. So there's 4 of those, and then we want 4 of these. So just once again, line them up so that they're not uneven. So we want all the sides lining up. When we cut these, we're quite particular about the way we cut our layer cakes and our jelly rolls, so that they are really quite cut on the bias. They're not cut on the bias, they're cut on the straight grain and whatnot. So you don't get any movement as far as bias. I don't know if you know what a bias is. A bias is when sideways, a bias is across here. So basically you can stretch it. The straight grains that way, you shouldn't be able to stretch that. So when we cut them, we are quite particular about ironing them the right way so that they don't get any, they're not cut on the, they're always cut on the grain, they're not cut on the bias. So just check those out, make sure that they're all lined up. Once again, cut 4 by 2.5 inch, putting the grain, the cut on the side of the 2.5 inch line up a line along the bottom so that it's straight. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so then we go back to our pattern and it says sew 1 grey and 1 strip together and iron. So we're going to put a grey and a red together. Just checking with the stamp. This is a stamp batik. Basically it's stamped with wax. Just check, sometimes there's a noticeable difference between the front and back, and with this one there is. So make sure when you're putting your fabrics together that you put them right side together. Like these plain fabrics, we call that a plain, they're fine because they're not, you can't tell the difference backwards and front, back and front. As with this one, you can see there's a difference, slight difference. I'm not sure whether you can actually see that. So make sure that you put them right sides together because you want them to, when they open up, to be showing up like that. So basically, you put them right sides together, you put the sides, make sure that they line up, and then as in our Back to Basics, it's really important to have a, do you want to zoom in on that, Agus? Really important to have a 1/4 inch foot. So for a beginner, a 1/4 inch foot is really essential. You can get all different sorts of 1/4 inch foot. This is a Juki one, so I use a Juki machine. Basically what you do is when you're putting the fabric into underneath your foot, you are lining the fabric up. Sorry, just got to put this back in here. With the side, this little side here, the little side there, you're lining the fabric up with the side of that so that you get this very accurate 1/4 inch foot, 1/4 inch seam, because patchworking is all about accuracy, cutting accuracy, sewing accuracy, ironing accuracy. So, yep, put the threads to the back. Now I've got a self-cutter, I've got a machine that cuts here, so, but it's always good to have a little pair of clippers on the edge here. They're a handy little tool to have. So, now with the stitch length, when you turn on most machines, they're usually around 2.4, 2.3. I always bring, for a stitch length for patchworking, it's good to bring it down to 1.8 because it's a smaller stitch, and basically when you iron it open, you're not going to get little holes where between the length of the stitch. So I bring my stitch down to 1.8. Some people have different preferences, but that's the way I was always taught, and that's what I like, so I always do that. So then you sew it slowly, making sure your edges are lined up here, and so your 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Now, when you're sewing clothes, you're often at the end of this line go backwards and forwards, and for some reason, I'm not really quite sure why. In patchworking, we don't sort of tend to do that. We just start at the front and go straight down, and then we don't end it off at the end. I think it's more because we do a little bit of unpicking along the way, and it's much easier to unpick if you've just got a straight seam. Now, what you want to do when you first start patchworking is check that your actual seams are 1/4 inch and get your accuracy. And after a while, your eye starts to realise, oh no, that's a little bit too small, or that's a little bit too big. So they start to, you start to realise, oh no, that's fine. So it's hard to see, but what I'm doing is I'm putting the edge of the fabric along the edge of the ruler, and I'm checking that my line of stitching is underneath the 1/4 inch mark, and that's good. That's a good little seam. So, and there's a general rule when you actually iron, is that you iron to the dark side. So just remember the dark side. So you iron to the dark side, and because normally if you've got a light colour fabric and a dark colour fabric, basically you want to be able to not see that little seam at the back. You want to have that hidden. So I'm going to iron that to the dark grey. So just bring your iron over, just iron your fabric nice and flat. You can iron it on the back. As you can see, it's towards the back, and the front is nice and ironed. So that's your first little strata, well, we'd really call that a strata piece. So it says repeat 7 times. So I'm going to repeat 7 times, and I'm going to come back to you, okay? Okay, so I'm back, and I've sewn together my strips, 2-inch strips, to make 8 of them. I think it was 8. Let me see. Yeah, 8 of them. So I've got 8 like this. So I'll just show you the little square that we're making. So we're making these squares, those ones there. So as you can see, there's 16 of them like that. So that's the ones that we're making. So it says in your pattern, cross cut each of these 8 strips into 4 by 2.5 inch cross cuts. So basically we go across here, we've got to cut this strata piece. Now, when you're lining up, pick a line on your ruler and put it across the sewn line in the middle there, and then you put your 2.5 inch line against the edge of it, and then line one up with close to the line up on the bottom, so that you could get it as square as possible. Okay, so that's 1, 2, cut 4 of them, being very accurate, 3, 4. So we've got 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the little squares like that. It's a 4-patch square. So we'll put them together. Now, when you're actually, as you can see, there's, because we've ironed all of these greys to the red, the reds to the grey, is it the grey to the red? The reds to the grey. when you turn them over, there's actually like, it's like a little, it locks in there. The two seams will lock in there. That's with the seams ironed the same way. But because basically, I'll start again. When they're like that, the seams are going the same way. But because we've turned them that way, one seam's up and one seam's down. So basically, you want to put them together like that so that the seams are locking. Get yourself a pin. And this is really important because you'll get really nice corners and whatnot. And then you put a pin in the actual seam line and have a look if it lines up at the back, which with that one, it doesn't. So we need to open up the seam a little bit more because it's not been ironed quite right. Okay, so that's on the seam. And then you bring it up through the seam. So basically, you're using the seam line on the front and the seam line on the back to line it up so that you get a really nice sharp corner. Otherwise, the corners won't be in. So I'll sew that together. And then we'll have a look and see how we went. So once again, the 1/4 inch seam for accuracy. You might have to lift up your foot just to get that. Now, not good practice to run over the top of a pin because they can break or they'll break your needles or whatnot. So, good idea to take it over. Sometimes I'll leave it I'll leave a pin and sew over the top of it, but very, very slowly. So, as you can see, very nice corners. So they match up. So you get a really nice sharp corner. That's what you want to aim at. Then bring it across to your iron. And iron it nicely. And as you can see, a very nice little, the corners there match up and they're nice and sharp. So that's what you have to try and achieve to get your quilt looking really neat. But you know, there's times where you don't always get perfect corners, but you know, it just depends on whether you want to be really anal and go back and do it, or you know, sometimes when you're learning, it's good to actually unpick stuff and not just go, oh, good enough is, you know, close enough is good enough. It's nice to have a nice finished quilt to look at it and go, oh, that's lovely. I've made a good job of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut all these and put them all together into these little ones because I've got to make 16 little units, which is called a four patch block. So I'll go through and do all this and I'll come back to you. We've got together our little 4-patch squares and there's 16 of them. So this we will set aside because they're part of a bigger block. As you can see, this is a big block here. That's 1 block, that's 2 blocks. So basically there's 4 blocks in each one of those blocks. But yeah, you can see it here. There's a block there, a block there, a block there. So this is where the 4-patch blocks are going in. So we're going to put those aside, and in the bigger scheme of things, then we'll put them together into a bigger block. So that's the finish of our first tutorial on the 4-patch block. So this is one small block in the scheme of the whole quilt, but basically we'll take you step by step how to make each one of those quilts. Thank you.